Greetings, one and all, and welcome to the Spirit Side. I'm Paul James Caiden. Today on the show, we are going to talk about something that is kind of interesting. And if there's any truth to what we're going to discuss today, maybe we should ponder it a little more often than not. So some of you may look at the title of this podcast and ask the question, the science of mind. Okay, what is that? Some of you may see that title and have a bit of an idea of what it is. But this is one of those podcasts I would say, stick with me, go with me till the end, because I think it's going to be worth hearing, worth talking about this particular subject. And I'd like to start out the discussion by telling a little bit of a story. And this story involves me when I was probably in the first or second grade, no later than the second grade. So how old was I then? Not too old. But I remember a lot of times either being in my room if I wasn't playing with my toys. Sometimes I would just, sit on the bed and look out of the window. Or I remember doing this when I would be out with the family, if we were headed out to the grocery store or wherever we happen to be going. I would look out of the car window as we drove and just, look at the sky, and I would think. And what I would think about, and you have to understand that at this point in my life, I had really no information about God, no information about religion, because, my parents, at that point in their lives, they didn't go to church. I don't think either one of them actually had read the Bible up to that point in their lives. So there was no religious indoctrination or talk that would have influenced this, because there was none really at that point in my life. But I had this thought. And I would think to myself, if only we could think big enough or raise our thoughts way up into the sky, high up there by God, it would change our lives. It could heal us if we were sick, if there was something bad happening in our lives or the world, it could fix it. But the idea wasn't, and this is why I would look at the sky, if we could just get our thoughts high enough up there to really realize and know how good and powerful and awesome God is, that He is in everything and surrounds everything. He, is in control of everything. If we could just get our thoughts high enough or big enough about God, it would just change everything. And there would be no problem that it couldn't overcome. I remember when I was a little kid, I loved the holiday time. I loved the holidays. I loved Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, Halloween. If it was, a holiday season, I was the happiest kid in the world. And it wasn't because so much, presents or candy or any of that sort of thing. Of course, that was a part of it for a kid. but I loved the way it made me feel. That excitement, that what people call that magic in the air. And for me as a kid, every holiday had its own magical feeling. And I loved the way that felt. Because to me, I would always think to myself, and this is no joke, no kidding, I used to think to myself, this is how God feels. God is wonderful and exciting and happy and magical. And I used to tell myself when I was a kid, nothing bad can ever happen. Nothing bad can ever happen to me during a holiday time, because this is when I feel so close to God. And if everybody knew this, man, how great that would be. We'd all have an awesome holiday. None of us would get sick. We wouldn't have any problems. And if we did, they would be fixed. And I remember many times in the fall, near Halloween, and at Christmas time, if I didn't feel good, if I was having a bad day, if I was having a problem at school, or, something was wrong, I would look out of the window in the fall, and I would tell myself, okay, it's just so wonderful and peaceful out there, and what I was actually doing when I look back is I was looking out of the window. And if it was Christmas time, I would sit in the living room and look at the Christmas tree, or sometimes sit on the floor right next to or in front of the Christmas tree and just look at the Christmas tree. I used to think it was so beautiful, and it made me feel so peaceful. And what I was actually doing when I would do those things is that I was feeling like I was tapping into the beauty and the peace of God. Now, again, I'm not kidding you. Here I was, first, second grader, 6, 7 years old, doing this. Because that magical, peaceful, wonderful feeling that I felt at the holiday time, that's how God felt. And if something was wrong, I would, look at the beautiful autumn scenery outside, or look at the Christmas tree, and think to myself, that I was actually looking at or feeling the love and the peace and just the tranquility and goodness of God. And I thought to myself, if I did this, if I didn't feel good, if I was having a problem at school, whatever was wrong, it would be fixed. God would fix it. Because you can't be immersed in that peaceful, loving, wonderful, magical feeling of God and have anything go wrong. It has to automatically fix itself. And you know what? As a kid, it never disappointed me. I would feel better very quickly. The situation would become okay. But I remember, again, as a little kid, first, second, third grade, I used to be sad when the holidays were over. I was sad because, they were my favorite time of year. There weren't as many family incidences with my father drinking sometimes. Or maybe I was just caught up in the time of the season where I didn't notice so much what he was doing unless he was yelling at me or verbally abusing me in some way. But I was also sad when the holidays would pass, because I would tell myself that's how God feels, and I don't feel him as strongly as I do the rest of the year. And even as a little kid, again, first, second, third grade, sitting there thinking to myself, well, I know he's there. He doesn't leave when the time of year leaves, when Christmas is over, when Halloween is over, when Easter is over. He doesn't leave. He's still there. He's still the same. But why don't I feel him as strongly? And it was so funny because, again, as a little kid, I came to this conclusion. It must be because I really like that time of year. It makes me happy. It makes me raise my thoughts higher. Think bigger about God. Think bigger about how God can change and heal our lives. And that's why I tap in and feel that awesome presence of God more at the holiday time. It's not that he changed, but that time of year made me change. It made me think different, higher, bigger about God. Now, I find that to be very interesting that, again, a little kid would have a thought like that. I mean, maybe a little bit more primitive than I'm wording it here as an adult, but the idea was there. It was definitely there. Now, leaving childhood and fast forwarding into the latter 1990s, I came across something quite by accident. And that something was the mind sciences, metaphysics, Christian metaphysics, divine metaphysics, some call it. And I found out, and I honestly never knew this before, because there was nobody in my family that practiced this or talked about this. There was nobody around me. Nobody practiced anything about Christian or divine metaphysics. Now, I've heard about Christian scientists before, but all I really knew about them was, they try to practice mind over matter. And they never go to the doctor. They're forbidden to. That's all I knew. Didn't care to know anything about them. That's all I ever heard. If the subject happened to come up, somewhere along the line. Both of these things, by the way, are not true. But I found out that this was actually a thing. There were people out there for years who believed just what I thought about when I was a kid. And it was called metaphysics, or the mind sciences. And the basic idea behind the mind sciences is just that. If you can raise your conscious high enough, if you could only grasp the truth about God, how great he is, how loving, how kind. God is peace. God is healing. God is giving. He is all things good. There is no darkness in God or shadow of turning. And if we could just raise our thoughts and our consciousness about God high enough and truly grasp the truth of who and what He is, it can fix or change anything. It can heal the body, bring peace to the mind, even change our physical circumstances. So suffice it to say, I was pretty amazed that this was actually a thing. Because you have to realize, for me, for those of you that know my story, I had very early these thoughts of God, this loving presence around me, and I used to think about some pretty deep stuff as a kid, this being one of them. But then I went from that right into, once my parents started going to church, I was kind of thrown into religion. And, at that point it became, you don't talk to God that way. You don't, you don't look at other philosophies or spiritual paths because they're all evil. They're all from the devil. So this is where the ultimate truth is. Do not wander outside of the little fenced-in area that we made for you here religiously. And I didn't wonder. There was a lot I didn't know. Anything I knew about any other religion for a long time was what I heard in church, or what I heard some televangelist say, or what I read in a book. And 100% of it was actually incorrect. So did the person not know? They parroted what they heard about another religion, and it was wrong. They made it up to scare us and keep us, from looking at other schools of thought. Who knows? So I didn't know this was a thing, and I was very surprised when I did find out, hey, there have been people, I think, since the 1800s that believe this. Imagine my surprise. But the mind sciences, or divine metaphysics, says that when things go wrong, because you'll hear people, oh, God did that. God made that person sick to teach them something. Oh, this horrible event, took place. We don't know why, but it must have been God's will that it happened. Well, divine metaphysics says no. There is no darkness or shadow of turning in God. God is love. God is all good. God is peace. And there is, God is not the author of any of these things. But the mind sciences say that when there is illness, when there is something bad that happens, it is generally because we are looking at a set of circumstances and not knowing the truth of God in those circumstances. We're not thinking high enough. We're focusing on the base material reality and putting all of our faith in that. It would be, for instance, if someone was coming down with the flu, and they would say, oh my God, I feel like I'm getting the flu. Oh boy, I hope it's not a bad case. I better go to the doctor right away. The person would focus mostly on having confidence, okay, the flu is coming. What do I need to do? I hope it's not a bad case of the flu and lays me up for a week or two. And that would be in the mind science of saying you're putting all of your thought, all of your energy, all of your faith, all of your attention on the physical manifestation of the flu, rather than stop, taking pause, and focusing. What is the truth about this idea? Did the flu come from God? No, it did not. God is health. God is healing. God is good. God is love. And raising our thoughts, raising our consciousness. And I'll tell you something. It's not always easy to do, and every person that ever practiced these things will say it's not easy to do, even when you've done it for years. But if you can and if you will, either you won't get the flu, somehow, hey, I dodged that bullet, or if you do get it, it would be a very mild case. You're not laid up. You're not missing all kind of time from work. You're not feeling miserable for 2 weeks or beyond. So it changes things, and when we look at the base material evidence of something, that's called, we're looking at error. We're looking at something that's outside of who and what God is. We're giving it our time, our attention, our faith. And that if we could not do that, the circumstances would, eventually change, heal, and end up much more pleasantly, a lot more quicker. Or quickly. And, of course, number two is that we live in a world, there's things that happen here. But again, what is the real truth about these challenging situations that we face? And then, of course, there's the individual school of thought and then the collective school of thought. If more people think God is peace and act accordingly, there would be more peace in the world. But if we have a majority of people thinking it's us against them, it's me against them, it's black against white, it's Republican against a Democrat, it's this country against that country, this nation against that nation, this religion against that religion, then we're going to have more discord. And even if we just sit in our houses and think that way every day, eventually we're going to run face to face with it right outside our own door. Because our thoughts will eventually, like a magnet, draw to us the circumstances we're thinking about all the time. And I'll tell you, I've made a study of this. I've practiced this. I've seen this kind of thing, man. I've seen people dead out with the flu or in the throes of like a bad cold or, some kind of other illness and see it go away almost instantly. Other cases, few hours, day or two, completely gone. I've seen that happen to me by practicing this, where something, oh man, I'm getting sick, or, something's going on, and just stop, think, raise my thoughts, think about the goodness of God. And sometimes things immediately would change or very soon after. But I've also seen in my own life and in the lives of other people that we do have exactly what we say and what we think. Because what we say is what we think. And if we sit around harping and complaining, nothing ever changes, the world is rotten, people are rotten, I'm sick, I'm broke, nothing ever goes right, the economy's going to hell, the terrorists are going to kill us all. It's there, brother. And I would say anyone listening to this podcast right now, if you don't believe me, take as little as 2 weeks to 1 month and listen to what people are saying and what they're thinking about around you. And then take notice if they don't have a whole basket load of what they think about and what they say all the time dumped right in their lap if they don't have it already. I mean, I started this back in the 1990s, observing myself, observing other people, observing my family members, remembering family members. I had a family member, if her and her husband got a pimple, oh, well, this could be cancer. And guess who eventually, it was years and years later, but guess who eventually got cancer? And these people were always sick, always at the doctor, because that's all they talked about was sickness and disease and illness and death. Those of you who listen to the podcast, you know my story, that I had relatives who majored on, for years, just morbid things like that. And that side of the family had more tragedy, more illness, more death, more medical procedures than anybody I have ever seen in my life. And I'm not making fun of them, but they are a stark reminder that what we think about all the time and then what comes out of our mouth in correspondence to those thoughts, you best believe it becomes our eventual reality. And so maybe it would do us well, all of us, if we took the advice of my former self as a child, riding in the back of the old Dodge Dart, looking out of the window as we went shopping, sitting on the passenger side of the car behind my mother in the back seat, looking up at the sky and just looking at the clouds and the trees and thinking, boy, if we could just think big enough about God, or get our thoughts high enough up there in the sky and know who He really is and how powerful and good He really is, it could change everything. Well, maybe we should all start doing that. Maybe we should take that advice, practice going outside on a beautiful autumn day and just observing the peace and the beauty of the landscape all around us. And just tell ourselves, in a sense, I'm looking at the material manifestation of the peace of God. This is what it feels like. This is what it looks like. There's no war, there's no sickness, there's no disease, there's no stress, there's nothing bad. It's just me out here in the gentle breeze and the crickets and the katydids and the clouds going overhead. It's just quiet. It's peaceful. It's healing. It's nurturing. I'm experiencing God right now. So this is how He is. And that is something you would be amazed at the results. And there's nothing wrong with doing that, because there are a lot of people throughout time, some of the greatest sages and saints, who would go out in nature, look at the beauty and the peace and the calmness, the intricacy of nature, and just ponder God. It's a beautiful experience. And then once you really get the feel, so this is how God feels, then you can do it anytime, anywhere, just sitting in your living room on a blazing hot summer day and just close your eyes and remember, that was how God feels. I can still feel that feeling. I can still tap into that peace of God, that love of God, that healing presence of God, whatever it is you need. This is essentially what the mind sciences are all about. And I just wanted to make this podcast and talk to you about this subject because I think it's an important one, and I think it's something that maybe we should all think about or think about doing. If we can just raise our thoughts high enough or think big enough about God, it would fix so many of the problems in our lives. And you know what? As I look back on my former child self, I have to say, I think he was right. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below if you're watching this on YouTube. Send me an email. My email is always in the podcast description. Let me know your thoughts. And until we meet again here on the spirit side, think higher. Have an awesome day out there, everybody.